Another week, another episode of Competitive Edge here on the Esportsbet.io YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining us. I'm sure some of you were keeping score at home off of our 0 for 5 predictions that we made last week on this show. This is why we said at the start of the show, guys, always dangerous at the start of a split to make predictions. That's also why we went for lower amounts of money than usual, just because there is a high degree of variance when you haven't seen some of these rosters before and you don't necessarily know exactly how off-season training was going. But even then, we did get ridiculously unlucky. So let's rehash some of this just to start things off.
Here's the thing. Don't worry. I'm ready to be the defense lawyer. I'll play some of these off. Go and hit me with them.
All right. So, NRG versus Immortals. So obviously Immortals.
Oh, my bad, guys. Did you all think Immortals was really good? Did you all know that? Well, I tell you what, you must have loved the fucking odds because that was ridiculous. Like, who the hell had Immortals winning that game, mate? Who the hell? Nobody. Nobody in the world.
Especially because Immortals like actually just straight downgraded their roster in a lot of ways. And if you had seen Tactical's games last split, or I don't know, the entirety of his career, you might have thought it would have ended up
in the
a little
same
bit
week.
differently.
He even looked crap, mate. Because Team Heretics didn't look too hot, did he?
So the next one the next one that we had was Golden Guardians losing to the new iteration of EG. And this was, of course, after EG loses Inspired, trades out their top lane. Jojo Pian looked pretty shaky. They lose Vulcan. And while Unforgiven is good, also no real way to have predicted that they would beat a Golden Guardians team that looked, at least for an NA team, pretty legit at MSI. And still has the strong core of River and Gory. And now they have Licorice performing in the top lane as well. And Golden Guardian actually did end up going and beating FlyQuest later in the week, which was, another of our predictions that we got wrong, because we thought FlyQuest as a favorite at 1.6 will be great. FlyQuest shit the bed and lost all of their games. So really tough stuff.
I don't believe anyone had FlyQuest losing these games.
Oh.
And I also don't really believe this. I know people meme and they like to laugh and see the novelty of the upset. If you really believe Evil Genius is a top team, you know what? You go with your side, I'll go with my side, and we'll see who gets there. Because I'm going to be betting against them a lot, mate.
Yep, I think that's perfectly fair. And then on the European side of things, we had SK at 1.7 to Heretics at 1.9. Heretics, another team that we could not have known that they would have been improved necessarily. I mean, VTO was, I think, an obvious improvement. So at least on paper, the roster looked better, but we thought it would take them a little bit more time to gel. And we said it was kind of, a 50-50, especially with SK, who had been more than the sum of their parts in previous LEC performances.
Problem is, I think SK is a dud, mate. I don't think they're going to be that good. I think they peaked already, and they haven't changed the lineup. It's not. They're not the team for me.
I think that's fair as the longer we go into the split. But for the first game, I thought it was relatively fair. And then we did take a flyer on BDS just because they had 2.595 odds, and they were 1 game away from winning the finals. So I think G2 was the favorite going into that series. But at the same time, the flyer was really good, I think, for the heavy odds.
The odds were well
BDS.
worth it, mate. Yeah.
So that was the only one that I kind of understand us being on the wrong side of. I think the logic behind everything else was pretty good.
The whole point of betting on a team with 3 odds is not that they are going to win. That is not the premise of what we're doing here, guys. The point is they would win that game. Look, not the one that you actually saw played out, but if you played a hypothetical game, I think they still win way more than 3 out of whatever on a BO1.
Yes. All right. Well, that will bring us to our next point here,
which is back now. Get it all back.
We'll get it all back now. Which is going to be discussing the matches that we've selected for this week to kind of analyze and predict for you. And it comes with a fun new bonus. So if you use our referral link below in this video, and if you sign up with the referral link, anyone who signs up with our referral link is going to get a cool new bonus from Esports Bet. And that is every week, Last Free Nation, and you'll hear this on our podcast as well, if you've already heard it on Power Spike and Summoning Insight this week, is going to pick a match of the week. And on that match of the week, you have the opportunity, if you predict correctly, to get an additional 10% profits up to the equivalent of $100 USDT. You get this if you're playing for free with DJT too, or any other cryptocurrency. Up to $100 of USDT you can get in addition to what you would already win. That means if you're going to win $1,000 of USDT, you will get an additional $100 of USDT on top of that. That's the maximum amount you can, but 10% up to $100. So this is the time you want to go place predictions on the matches that we select, because you have a chance of winning more than you usually would. And that's just really a great deal. And that's on top of the fact that if you sign up with our link, you can still get either, you choose, a 50% deposit bonus up to $200, or basically $100 risk-free bet, 100 USDT risk-free bet, meaning that if you bet and you lose, you can just message the mods on the Esports Bet Discord and they will refund that money on your first bet up to $100. So now it's the time to get in, take a flyer, maybe get 10. You can, at this point, you could get a 10% bonus on our match of the week and come out with a risk-free bet. So just say it's a pretty good deal.
Like you're going to see it in a second, but this particular match of the week, if you've never done the risk-free bet, this is where I would place it.
This is
This
crazy.
is a mega opportunity.
So the reason our match of the week for Last Free Nation this week is the Telecom war between T1 and KT. And as always, and we've discussed many times, T1 fans skew the odds crazily. It's almost never worth it to predict T1 because you never get good odds because the T1 fans are so all in on them. And in this Telecom war, now T1 has looked a little bit shaky. Yeah, they probably should have beat GENG in that series, but they did end up losing it to GENG and kind of throwing the game back over into GENG's favor. And they're playing KT. KT is a team that has looked very good. They also lost to GENG, but that was in a series where, first off, they smashed the first game, absolutely dominated GENG in the first game. The second game was the incident where they forced aiming to sell Static Shiv because it was a banned item, which basically ruined that game. And I think kind of tilted KT to the rest of the series. There was an hour-long pause where the coach was basically fighting with the referees, which then got him suspended and fined. So it was a whole shit show that was happening that day that I think took the players out of the game. Now, I do think KT and GENG are comparably close right now, but I also think they're a cut above T1. Now, T1 has done very well in this matchup. The last time they faced was the playoffs where KT arguably should have won, but threw the final game of the series in the upper bracket of the LCK playoffs. And T1 has gotten the better of KT, but this edition of KT looks really, really strong, and it's just about the odds, guys. Even if you think T1 is favored to win this matchup, the odds are 1.375 for T1 and 3.142 for KT. This is the easiest slam dunk prediction for KT of all time.
Yes.
Like, we're not going to put a ton of money on this because, again, I do think it's going to be a close series and could theoretically go either way. But the upside for KT is just absolutely bananas. So
this really is a coin flip, this series. So for 3 odds, I think it's mega. 3.1 even.
Yeah, it's always like this when you see some of the games like with T1 where they could possibly lose. It is worth saying, obviously, that they don't frequently lose, or they didn't at least last split, but I think this is a weaker iteration of T1. And, you know, they did go, of course, 17-1 in the spring, but a lot of that was built around the carry Hail of Blades 80 carry support meta. And they did look a lot weaker comparatively in the playoffs once the meta shifted and we saw the best of fives. I don't think we're going to see a level of dominance from any team in the LCK. At least that's the early indications. But this is KT's time to shine. And if you just think about the meta too, you know, the Azir coming back is just perfect for BDD. Keen has been probably the best top laner so far in summer in LCK. And they have a reliable late game team fighting carry in aiming. And Cuz has been shockingly good. I would say he's probably overperforming right now. There are things that, you know, we've liked seeing about T1. Their aggressive bot lane. They've had some interesting Neela games with Gumayushi, and they've been pushing those bot advantages. So they're still going to be a very strong team, and T1 still has that shot to win. But it's just irresistible. These odds are just absolutely irresistible, and that's why we selected this as the game of the week, guys, for you, because
Also, just
it's too
traditionally a
crazy.
great series, isn't it? Doesn't it? Somehow now they actually have very comparable rosters. But even in years when one roster would be worse, like KT was way worse, it would always inexplicably just become a banger series.
Yeah, actually, since I inputted the odds onto our overlay here, they've actually shifted a little bit. So it's now 1.354 to 2.883. So people are learning. I would say that perhaps these odds were a bit crazy and we're seeing them come back down to earth a little bit. But I still think that, this, I'm going to put 500 onto KT here. The 2.8 is still super good for what I think is going to be a really, really close series overall, and one that KT certainly has the opportunity to win. So we'll go ahead and check that one in. And the next one too, I find very confusing, Thorin, which is another LCK match. This one between GENG and DPLUS, and I'll explain why I think that. I think GENG is a bigger favorite in this series than I think T1 is. Versus KT, right? So I do think GENG is likely to win, but we still have over 3 odds for D+. And the thing about this matchup is this matchup between last year and this year with the same cores to these rosters, except arguably D+ is better, because even though you had Noguri on last year's roster, it wasn't like the Noguri of old, right? He was not anywhere near as good. And you just dramatically upgraded with Deft at 80 carry. And Kana is just a stable, solid top laner. Not special, but I think pound for pound, this roster is better. And we already know that GENG doesn't want to play against this roster because they are intentionally not picking them in playoffs, right? So this matchup's been close, and I think that there's definitely a chance here that D+ pulls off the upset, because they generally play very competitive series against each other.
And also, this is one of those games where, like, show me a Showmaker LeBlanc static shiv game. Let's have a pop off there. You're gonna have a massive pop off in this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is totally possible. And like I said, last year we did see the selection from GENG in the playoffs, avoiding, they picked a higher seed in Live Sandbox when they had that opportunity to select against them. And we didn't get to see this matchup because D+ lost inexplicably to Hanwha Life in the spring playoffs, which was quite the upset at the time. So yeah, I think when we consider this, there's always the extra like bag of tricks that D+ brings, and honestly, a lot of the time we've seen GENG respond very poorly to things, surprises like Karthus jungle. Now we know from the last series Canyon's going to play Nico jungle, or he's been playing Sion jungle. And these are all things that have really thrown GENG for a loop. And oftentimes, too, Canyon can be very disruptive in the jungle to Peanut. How many times have we seen Peanut fall behind because Canyon is targeting him, and they're playing really hard through Canyon with support from Showmaker? It's also a meta that should suit Showmaker. Maybe the Twisted Fate comes back out again. We know his Talia's great. This is definitely could smack of an upset here. So let's take a look at this. We're not going to go quite as hard on this one. Again, the odds have shifted a little bit since I put them in. Is now slightly below 3, so 2.8 for Damwon Kia. We'll also throw 300 on this and see if one of these upsets is going to do something for us.
I'll also tell you, here's a piece of advice from someone who literally bets as a living. He makes money doing it. Kassad, who works with Last Free Nation, bets on sports. Like, he follows all the football in Europe and stuff. And one thing he told me is his pattern is when he bets on like an underdog that he does think is an underdog. So the difference with the KT one is Monty actually thinks they're a slight favorite, potentially even.
Yes.
So their odds are crazy. But the D+ one, they are an underdog. So what Kassad does is when it's an underdog, he bets half a unit. So that, similar to Monty, you don't do the full unit, you do like a half, but you just like the odds enough. So it's a way to sort of offset so that it's not a big deal if you lose it, but if you win, you still make plenty more than you would have betting a unit on the favorite,
Yeah. I think that's probably a
tip.
solid strategy.
It's basically bankroll management, they call it,
Okay, so we're going to move on to LCS and LEC right now. I picked a couple of matches here. I'm interested in your take on this one first, Thorin, because we've got Team Liquid, who is currently 3-0, but I kind of don't believe it, at 1.625. And we have EG, who's done surprisingly well with this new roster, at 2.105. So which of these do you take?
Here's the problem. I do think this is a poison chalice because obviously they both could be ropey. But here's the thing. I actually think I would, on this one particular one, take the underdog. And here is why.
Yes.
Because I actually think the best positions are mid and AD, and they have the better players, in my opinion.
Yep. So my logic for this, so there's a few things. I refuse to believe that Pyosik is just going to continue to be as good as he has been. And so much of the success has been off of Pyosik having some really big games, which to his credit, he has played well. And Summit also being very dominant within the top lane. I think the issue for me here is that, as you say, it's not that Harry and Yun have shown us that they are somehow super threatening players at this stage of the LCS, and they certainly were weak points last split. Meanwhile, on the EG side, Jojo Pion, who kind of had a bad split last time, has looked much more legit this time around. And you have Unforgiven on that side. Like, my question is Yun going to be able to punish Unforgiven and Ayla? I'm not sure they're the team that's going to be able to do that. And Revenge is a perfectly good top laner, underrated top laner, and he's got a better team surrounding him than he did with Immortals, and I think he can kind of weak side or lose gracefully into Summit. So because of the odds and the fact that we're getting EG at over 2, I do think it's probably worth taking EG here, but this one is a bit of a close call. I just don't think that you can
hate the idea. Here's the other thing I don't believe in LCS, right? I don't believe in having like a Renekton main carry the game from top lane in LCS. It just doesn't exist. Like, Huni isn't here anymore, boys. Like, but that's the thing. I think actually kills on ADC are worth so much more in the West because people just know how to win off it. They know what to do with the lane. Like, it's really hard to play around like a super heavy carry from top lane. Like, that's why it's mainly the LPL that's the king of that region style, you know?
Yeah. And even though there are, I think, notable weak points like Ayla, on EG and Armeo, it's a big shift in jungle style from them, from Inspired, who is the kind of quintessential farm / carry jungler. But they've made enough roster changes and they had enough synergy. And I think this could be like a Jojo Pion pop-off game where he does a lot of damage. That's kind of the sense that I have. So even though I really don't believe in either of these two teams, I think Team Liquid is quite fraudulent based off of their wins, and I don't think the way they're winning is sustainable. I'm going to put 250 onto EG here and see what we can do with that one. Not super confident, but a little bit confident.
I think people are forgetting an aspect about Jojo Pion. We were never saying he was a bad player. He just, the last split was his 3rd split ever.
Yeah,
like, to me, I was just very impressed about how they sort of like figured out how to not put too much pressure on. Now it's his time to shine. And quite frankly, he should be one of the best mids in the league. Like, he is a legit player.
Yeah. And that transition for him, like, I think it was rough for him in spring, but there was all the fire with the Danny situation, and it seems like they were transitioning this team away from some of the stars, like Inspired, like releasing Inspired, like trading Vulcan. They seem to be cutting costs associated with their rosters, so it's understandable, I believe, if some of these players were distracted by things outside of the game and potentially underperforming. Okay, next one. Team Heretics, do you believe in the 3-0 and their potential against a Koi roster who has arguably also underperformed? But I posit to you, Thorin, Szygenda's been playing pretty well, and Team Heretics have Evie, who is TPing bot and still kind of ints. Like, is there a world where if Larson doesn't fuck up on playing Static Shiv Ahri, which is number 1, I don't think very good, and then number 2, he played it really badly and didn't even use Static Shiv or split push like he should have been. Is there a world where Szygenda can carry this team even though they've been underperforming, or does Team Heretics actually pull off yet another potential? I mean, they're the odds-on favorite here, but we would still, I think, consider this an upset.
Here's the thing. I don't particularly believe in Heretics as like a team that could win LEC, but in this matchup, I do believe in them to win, and here's why. Larson is not the side lane mid laner. That's not his game. His game absolutely is farm up mid lane. That's it. And then have team fights was the old Koi identity. Now you have a worse version of the Summit story, because I don't believe in Szygenda at all to carry. He can get the kills. He is a 1v1 specialist. He can do kills in lane. He can play carry champions. The problem is Koi team with Odwan, they never played around top. They didn't know how to do it. They were a team that were team fights and let comp and the bot lane carry, and Larsen's always going to be strong because of the farm. So I think they've lost their whole identity, mate. That Trimby for Advien trade looks like one of the robberies of the century. Remember, they're the ones who initiated that, guys. It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't Fnatic asking for them, as far as I've heard. They wanted to get rid of Trimby, and
that's
they
what I
wanted
understand
Advien.
as
So
well.
I think they've tanked their bot lane. I think the mid lane was never like a super pop-off player. He's like a farm-up player, and he does strong damage in team fights. And I don't believe in the Szygenda, as people are calling him, to carry the game. He can get the kills, but you saw it in a game this week. He got the kills, and they didn't know what to do. So my problem is I actually think Team Heretics is going to win this. People can say all they like about Evie. He doesn't have to do much. In this particular team, the rest of the team's good enough. Jankos is mega. Malrang's also just fraudulent, I have to say. So I actually, look, I don't believe, like, they're not super great team, but I actually like those odds for Heretics. Like 1.7, that's pretty nice. If you think they're the favorite.
Yeah, it dropped a little bit to 1.686. We'll still put
Still good.
We'll still put 250 on this one.
Yeah,
250 on this one. Pretty good return. And our final match, another LEC match. And this is one where I'm definitely going to pick the favorite because G2 is at almost 1.5. And we talk about this a lot. Like, if you can get what you think is a pretty heavy favorite at like 1.4 to 1.5, I think you feel pretty good about what's going on. It has dropped a little bit to 1.468 since I put these odds in. But Vitality, like, I'm out on these guys. Like, I'm like, surely this is, we keep saying this. The joke is the razorcake keeps continuing. We've surely, like, Vitality can be good now. I just think this collection of players is just not going to work at this
To
stage.
me, the problem is this type of a match, because of what we saw in the first week, there are absolutely players on Vitality could carry this B or want to win the game. It's just that at the moment, G2 actually looks like a cohesive team. Most of the players are playing well. And essentially, what reason do you have to pick against them? Like, if this was sight unseen on week one, I might tell you to take the Vitality odds, although I don't think they'd be that high. But now, like, I have to see them show me they're good. Like, if Upset ends up carrying the game or Perkz has a good game or something like that, then I'll say fair play, okay. But I don't mind taking this one. Like you say, if you can get almost 1.5 for G2, you just take it, mate. Right now, they're the safest team in LEC.
And they're not a gimmick team. You know, they're not reliant.
Oh, no.
Like, Yike has, I think, has been developing really nicely as a jungler, as a player. Their wins are with him on Maokai. They're playing more of a front-to-back team fighting style, and they still have all their old tricks if they need them. Meanwhile, for Vitality, they don't have a cohesive team style, you have to say. Like, I do think that the Static Shiv LeBlanc picks are very good for Perkz' play style, and they were able to get one win before VTO was like, hey, yo, pick me the Kai'Sa. And even then they almost lost because Evie was, like, inting in some of the mid to late game team fights. But this is a team that I think is just kind of arbitrary and random in their win conditions, whereas G2, yeah, they lost to Mad Lions, but that was obviously a throw through trolling with some of the Nico stuff. They were trying to style on their opponents. I don't think that happens again. And I probably, if you're Dylan Falco, their coach, you're pretty pissed about that one and may have had some words with the team afterwards. So I think they'll tighten up their play in this next week of competition. And like you said, the odds aren't 1.499 anymore. They're 1.468, but these are still extraordinarily good odds.
I also think another factor is this. Mickey X looks dynamite already on Nami. He shows he isn't just an engaged player. Meanwhile, Kai'Sa actually should be in The Hague. He should be being asked questions about where he was on certain days and what crimes he committed, because there was some really egregious moments there. So if he's going to play like that, mate, they're not even going to be doing anything in lane. So Upset is going to be locked out of the game, basically. So I'm feeling this G2 win. I'm very confident in this one.
All right,
Loving the odds.
We'll put 500 on it. Gets a good return, 734. And we'll hopefully have done better now that we've actually seen some of the teams and these new rosters. Man, really unlucky to go 0 for 5, especially when we were picking mostly odds favorites. That, you know, what wasn't like huge odds favorites. They were relatively close, but we thought we could get some good value. Sometimes weeks just go like that. That's why we say maybe play it a little bit more conservative in the early weeks of a split before you have a good eye test on new team styles and the way that the synergy is working out before, ramping it up as the split goes on. Remember, guys, check out our match of the week. You will hear about that match of the week on all of our shows. So if you're watching Last Free Nation podcast, you'll hear it there as well. Be sure to place your predictions on that match to get that additional 10% winnings up to the value of $100 USDT. Insane value. Really cool that Esports Bet is doing this weekly for you guys in conjunction with us. Remember, it has to be on an account that has our referral code. So sign up and you can play for free, guys, as usual with DJT. Yep. And if you do really well with DJT,
get free DJT.
Yeah, every day you log in, you get free DJT, and you can convert that to cryptocurrency if you want to, and you keep doing very well later on. So it's a fun way to play along, whether it's crypto, whether it is fiat currencies, they got some of those up now, or whether it's with DJT. And we'll be back. Remember to subscribe here to the Esports Bet channel. We'll have more competitive edge for you in League of Legends and also CSGO once the player break is over. We'll see you next week.